Okay, let's try this. This is the Seven of Swords, as you can see. And I think because of comments that people have posted and emailed me over the years, this does seem to be a card that gives people problems because they're not quite sure what to do with it. And so let's consider a few things. One is that sword. Okay, we know that a sword is a dangerous instrument because they're sharp, for instance, and so you can cut yourself or you can do damage to other people. And so a sword is dangerous except or unless it's under, if it's under control, then it's okay, because a sword can be an instrument of defense, for instance, as well as attack. And a sword is okay if it's in the right hands. But somehow looking at the way the fellow's walking and looking behind and the way he's holding the swords, it's a bit like saying that proper control is lacking in this picture or with this particular card. And so you might want to bring in or think about the idea of control and proper control and adequate control when this card comes up. So it could be the kind of situation where young people get out of control because there was no adult supervision. Not that I'm saying that all young people are irresponsible and so on, but that can be the kind of thing that's shown by this card. It can be like an accident waiting to happen. So if this card comes up, you ought to pay attention to what's going on and be extra careful that you've maybe thought about what can go wrong and you've taken steps to make sure that if things begin to get out of hand, that you've got safety procedures in place and that they'll begin to act if things begin to go bad. So depending on the question and the questioner, you can get an idea of the kind of thing that ought to be available, that ought to be around, to make sure that if things do begin to go wrong, that they don't escalate into a complete problem or a complete meltdown. So the other thing is that there's a Buddhist teaching, I think, about the undisciplined mind, and I think it says that the undisciplined mind creates its own prison. And so the idea is that if you don't be careful, or if you aren't careful about the thoughts that you think, you can bring about difficult situations. And so that's easy for me to say, but try this for yourself, even if you're not doing a reading for somebody at the time. Monitor your thoughts during the course of one day and think and just make a note of how many problem thoughts or bad thoughts come into your mind, just automatically come into your mind. Because it doesn't mean that you're thinking deliberately about something, but you can hear a bit of a song, for instance, that will remind you of something, a bad time in your past, and you find you're dwelling and reliving and going over and over and over again the bad things that happened because of the association with that particular song. Or it could be you remember some criticism that somebody made of somebody else, or something harsh that somebody said to you, and instead of dismissing it and replacing it with a thought of harmony, you sort of think it over and sort of stay with it and really relive the moment several times with emotion, with feeling, and sort of embed it in your consciousness, embed it in your mind. And I think you'll be surprised and maybe a little bit disgusted at how many negative thoughts come into your mind over the course of a day. And that's without even trying to be negative. You know, you can think that you're being quite positive and optimistic about things, but notice how many thoughts come into your mind. And so the idea is that if you allow any old thought to come into your mind and let it stay there, let it dwell, you're creating problems for yourself. So with this card, I think what's important is control your thinking or monitor your thoughts. And if something that comes, think about a thought as a visitor. If you wouldn't want, let's say you've got this dirty old ragged, smelly person who wants to come into your living room or into your bedroom, if you wouldn't let somebody like that in and to share your space, why are you letting a thought, a smelly old thought, come into your mind. And so what you do is, with this card, I think part of the advice of this card is, don't let smelly old thoughts enter your mind in the first place. And if you do find one there, get rid of it as quickly as possible. So this card, the Seven of Swords, I think in a lot of books, it's got a bad reputation because the fellow seems to be making off with something that probably doesn't belong to him. You have to wonder about what... let's say this is for the questioner, that represents the questioner. What's this fellow thinking? What's the mindset of this individual? And maybe it's a bit like a teenager, because if you think back to when you were 15 and people told you, don't drive too fast, or don't do this, don't do that. And I guarantee that you thought, as did I, it's never going to happen to me. I can do it because I'm not going to get caught. And I'm sort of immune to bad things happening. And it's a bit like that's the kind of thinking going on with this individual, that you think you're never going to get caught, that nothing bad is going to happen to you. And so you can be more reckless than you would normally be because you're going to get away with it. So if we're thinking about one or two words to describe each card, this one could represent youthful folly or youthful ignorance, or the ignorance of youth, only because ignorance means to not know. They just don't know any better. They don't know any different. And that can be what you're up against with this card, and that can be why this is a bad card. This can be why this is a card of problems, or that shows problems. And it does have a bad reputation because the fellow is meant to be, or people look at it and think he's taking something that doesn't belong to him, and he's running away and rushing away from the scene. He's left a couple of things here, or they were too difficult to remove, but he's taken stuff, and he's taking what doesn't belong to him. And so, maybe reversed, it's even worse. Also, this way, there's something is stolen, but you get it back, upside down. You'll never see it again, no matter how hard you try. And so maybe this is the reason for the bad reputation, that, especially when it's upside down, then you've got a problem that cannot really be solved. So there's no solution. So what do? You do something else instead. Go to plan B, or give up. Just stop trying to get what you want in that particular area, because it's not going to happen. And that happens sometimes. Things go wrong and there's no solution. There is no way to get anything back. There's no way that anything good will come from a situation. And because that happens in life, actually, there has to be a card, or more than one card, that shows that kind of thing happening. And the Seven of Swords reverse is a good candidate for that kind of experience or condition in life. However, if we look at the card upright, what's it showing? We've got a camp in the background, and we've got somebody going away from the camp. And maybe let's take it upright. It's a positive meaning, and upside down is a problem. But upright, what does it mean? Maybe it's just indicating somebody who is being careful. You know what I mean? That he's making off, or he's leaving, but he's not particularly rushing, or maybe he's having to move fast because he moves fast, or he has a reason for moving fast. But it doesn't have to mean that there's something bad about him, that there's something illegal about what he's doing. Because maybe he's just being careful. Because think of it like this, that sometimes you can give people orders and you'll be obeyed, or you can say something to people and they'll cooperate. But sometimes you say something to somebody and you know they're not going to agree, or they're not going to cooperate with you. So instead of just asking straight out for what you want, you know that with some people, sometimes you have to sort of beat around the bush, and you have to approach from an angle. And you can't just ask them straight out. You have to set up the situation, let's say. And then once the situation's right, once they're in a good mood, then you ask what you ask. And this can be what this card represents. A situation like that, where you can't be straightforward. Maybe because you know that if you ask for this thing...